Hi, friends. Welcome back to the GrassRoots TruthCast. I'm Gene Valentino, and we've had him on before, but I've asked him to come back. He's got his own polling company now, well known in the national circles. You would think he was a MAGA supporter supporting Trump. In many circles, he got that label and was accused of being that, but he's not. He's got some interesting insight on what to bring forward with Mr. Donald Trump and how things have been going in the White House and for the nation in the last few months in particular. We've got a broader story on his new company, The Honest Poll, and him right after this.
Hey, everybody, this is Mark Mitchell, head pollster of The Honest Poll, thehonestpoll.com. Make sure you go check out GrassRoots TruthCast at grassrootstruthcast.com with Gene Valentino and subscribe while you're there. It's a great show.
Some people watch opportunities pass by. Others create them. This is for the entrepreneurs, the deal makers, the risk takers, and the relentless few who refuse to settle for average. Corporate Menace Coffee Co. is built for early mornings, late nights, and the moments that define careers. Specialty coffee, roasted to order for you, the person with goals too big for excuses. Work harder, think bigger. Corporate Menace Coffee Co. What are you waiting for? Fuel up now. www.corporatemenace.com.
Hi, friends. Welcome back to the GrassRoots TruthCast, and welcome my return visitor, Mr. Mark Mitchell of The Honest Poll. How you doing, Mark?
Great to be back. I really enjoyed our first conversation. You're one of the nicest people I know, Gene, so I'm really happy you had me back on.
Thank you, buddy. It's I kind of caught you at an interesting time. I know you had a longer history going back to Donald Trump's first term with the Rasmussen reports and your claim to fame as it grew from Rasmussen. You have branched out since then, and no ill feeling. You've, just like many of us, moved on to other pastures, and I commend you for that. I think the most interesting thing about Mark Mitchell, folks, is that he's not going to tell you what you want to hear. Rather, he's going to tell you what you need to know. And Mark, what do I mean when I say that?
Well, people have called me a black pillar and why do I doom so much? And I turned on Trump. And, you know, a lot of these people have ulterior motives, but my motive is to represent the American people, like, period. And I was a longtime Trump supporter. I was one of his earlier keyboard warriors. I spent thousands of hours myself trying to get this guy into office, posting like frog memes and stuff like that. I mean, and the reason is because I objectively was very tired of the establishment Republican Party. And I thought that his platform had a lot of what America needed. And when I became a pollster, I was able to quantify that, yes, they want the things that Donald Trump ran on in both terms. They are sick of the establishment. They're sick of foreign interventionism. They want all of the illegals gone. They want higher wages. They want, China reined in. They want everything that Trump ran on. And the problem is that it's all falling apart. And so
Well,
a lot of,
in a nutshell, you heard him say when you were working with him that he was in there to drain the swamp. Is the swamp drained?
no, which is why nobody believes the FBI. You can take any example of everything he's ran on, and it's just not. Like, objectively, America was desperate for real fixes. They needed somebody who was not just going to say the tired Republican talking points and actually do something.
Well, and still do.
Yeah, right, because nothing has been fixed. And you could say, well, Trump's done more than, like, okay, I agree. But after Biden, like, the people were desperate. This was an existential election. And yes, we needed the border closed. But that was the bare minimum. We need 10 million people gone and wages higher to fight the affordability crisis. We need every single one of the federal agents completely gutted. We need all of this rampant hundreds of billions of dollars of federal fraud, like, completely reined in. And it's like, nice, we have some task forces here and there. But at the end of the day, by the time that Trump begins to lose his political capital, the ball will not have been moved downfield in a meaningful manner. And I think it's because this Trump that we're seeing in the last year and a half is not getting the same populist feedback loop that he had on Twitter, and that he's surrounded himself with people who do not have the best interests of the American people in their hearts. And you know what? Like, that could be a black pill message for people, especially if you're still like hoping that Donald Trump pulls it out. We can get into it. I don't think it's going to happen. I think we're 3 or 4 months away from a midterm in which he's probably going to lose the House, and they're going to go nuts and pick his administration apart. But I want to be optimistic here. And then I think, as you've said, your show's the GrassRoots TruthCast. There is a very big grassroots opportunity here to redefine a political movement on the right that has the right components that it needs to beat the socialists. And what I'm going to tell you, it's not like your granddaddy's Republican values. It's just not Ronald Reagan anymore. It's got to be something different. And if the Republicans don't get it together, they're going to be generational losers, because people don't want to hear, oh, well, capitalism has served us and we can't have any socialism. Well, there's a lot of nuance there, and socialism is starting to win.
What socialism is starting to win, and I'm not too quick to point the finger at Donald Trump for that alone. However, I do look at something that's happened in your term of service. I've noticed that what you're polling or relying on for polling information is sometimes contrary to what they say. The voter says one thing, but what do they actually do when they go in the voting box,
right,
and the voting booth? Do you find consistency or inconsistency between those two notions?
So increasingly, you see a lot of inconsistency between sentiment and behavior. And sentiment is like you poll a bunch of people and they say, yeah, I'm a Republican, I'll vote for Republicans. And then they just don't show up. And that's because, well, the Democrats are more enthused. And then there's a whole nother layer of they had more advertising expenditure. They have an asymmetry in get out the vote operations. There's all these other layers. And looking at this midterm, it's very hard to predict specifically about what is going to happen, because you have a lot of things happening, like really kind of for the first time. The Republicans have never gerrymandered like this in the past in such a major way. And people say, well, the 15 to 20 seats pickup, but that's all calculated based on a 2024 map with Donald Trump on the ballot. Donald Trump is not going to be on the ballot. Then you say, well, the Republicans have a massive fundraising advantage, but no, Democrats have $2.5 billion in Act Blue. And then you have who knows what's going to happen with the election integrity stuff, complete potential black swan there. And then you have this Iran situation, which is going to potentially be ironed out in some way, either positive or negative, between now and the midterm. So there's like, if you look at the polling, the industry says Democrat +5 with the redistricting. That might be enough that there's like no gain or loss. It's just the House is what it is. But the Republicans have been underperforming all of the polling in every single one of the special elections. So there's this added layer of enthusiasm and a feeling, especially among younger Trump voters, of a betrayal. And again, like you said, this isn't all of Trump's fault. Absolutely not. But Trump was supposed to use this Republican mandate and reform the Republican Party and turn it into the things that represented the American people. And so I think a lot of people are perceiving it as a lost opportunity, and the polling supports that. Only 33% of people say that Donald Trump has kept his promises more than recent presidents. And I think, I forget the numbers, it's a very small amount of people who say that this administration is better than the first Trump administration. Only 60% of Republicans say this administration is better than the first one. So,
yeah, but there's at least 60% that are saying don't give us socialism, which is really communism in disguise. I see a transition like you're suggesting, but I don't know. Is the pollster, who's winning? Is Trump really winning, or has he just gotten his arms around something so much bigger than he expected that cleaning the swamp absolutely is almost a quantum task with and needs 2 more terms? What do you say?
I think we're headed towards major collapse and upheaval. And I'm not trying to be provocative or negative. I think historically, with the whole fourth turning concept, that when you see this amount of institutional rot and where you see such a huge gulf between the values of the younger voters and the values of the older voters, and where the older voters are digging in very hard on an older system of values that the young people perceive has failed them. And then when you see the number of people who are just being left out of the economy, they don't have anything to live for, they're not reproducing, they're not buying houses, and they're being underemployed specifically because of all of the legal and illegal immigration, that eventually, whether it takes a hard landing or whether it takes some kind of foreign war, there will be some type of upheaval. And I kind of perceive the second Trump administration as sort of like the American electorate's attempt to take a step down a path that might ultimately lead to upheaval, but as like an olive branch to the system. We're trying to get this fixed. Here's our guy. This is the avatar of the American people that need change. Like, work with him. And I think he got co-opted. And it was always an uphill battle. I don't know if he could have succeeded or not, but I think to get the kind of change that we needed, Americans sort of understood that some rules were going to have to be broken.
Yeah,
So,
but
like,
don't you see an alienation occurring from both parties? I wouldn't say it's just Republicans saying he didn't give us everything we needed. I see more of a alienation on the look what's going on just within the Democrat Party itself. My words.
yeah,
The what is it? The DSN movement, social democrat
yeah,
entity, is compromising progressives of the early days when that was the extreme point. Now progressives in Democrat Party are more of a common baseline when you look how farther left they've gone with
yeah,
socialism and communism. These were factors that I can't point to Trump being responsible for, but I do think, and I've said this to you in our last interview, I say it before, I say it again, we need to win this Save America Act coming up, hopefully in the next few weeks. And God willing, filibuster or no filibuster, we have a Republican House and Senate that helps Trump secure constitutional amendments necessary to weld this into a
yeah,
sense of permanency in our governance, so we're not screwing around with nitwit legislators every year or two trying to put patches on the tire that don't work. We need a constitutional amendment that clearly provides a definition of who a citizen is before we even talk about voter ID and who's entitled to vote. And I think
yeah.
now is I think he's pushed the envelope to getting us there. And admittedly, it hasn't been comfortable. Frankly, I don't know how the guy survives all the stresses he's put himself through, not to mention his family. But in your new role here
Yeah.
with your new company called The Honest Poll, what kind of polling are you going to do? If I run for Congress, you're going to help me with a poll, or are you going to work behind the scenes with the White House and trying to steer them in a positive direction, whether they like your message or not?
Well, people who didn't see my previous media, I've been the head pollster of Rasmussen Reports for 5 years. I helped rebuild the company. A lot of people might be surprised to hear this, but our YouTube revenue actually saved us in 2024. And I made a couple other major changes in the company that kept us in the black. Like, it was touch and go. They really didn't have enough money when I started to compensate me, like, basically much, if anything. And they were very happy with my commentary up until just recently. It jeopardized their ability to collect the political action committee check from a pro-Trump political action committee. So that's a major no-no for an independent pollster. Like, I'm not supposed to, my credibility does not survive if my company is taking money from the regime. And so I knew I had to leave. I spent the last 3 months leaving and getting my company ready. And then I got myself fired by criticizing the Trump administration against direct orders. Again, at an independent pollster. It's not good. So now I'm the honest poll. This is something I always wanted to be. and it's my own company, so I'm completely independent, and I will not take any money from any political action committee or political party. That's not how you represent the voters, because the entire polling industry, except for like Rich Barris, the way it works is polling is commoditized, but what is not commoditized is lying, is having your credibility and then lying. It's like a prostitution industry is what it really is. And I will not do that. I want to represent the American people. So we're going to poll on public sentiment just like Rasmussen does, but I will have the editorial control. And we're definitely going to go into this topic on socialism and capitalism as well. And like you said, again, Trump's partly to blame, but in like a nuanced like way. Like Trump very much did move the Overton window to the right, which is something the Republican Party had not done. So he's the one out there on True Social talking about repealing Hart-Celler, for instance, which would do wonders in increasing American wages and potentially the amount of assimilation that happens. Like it would change our culture in a way that would undo some of the past sins of Republican politicians in the past. But there was never, ever any chance of that happening. And so when you're moving the Overton window right, and yet like, so you have the acceptable discourse here, but what's politically acceptable here, and they're going farther and farther apart. This is a recipe for increased political friction. And I think that's partly what we're seeing. So there's a lot of people who are like frustrated. And again, Trump can't fully be blamed for the sins of the Republican Party. The Republican Party has now been co-opted essentially by big donor interests, foreign interests. It's becoming more and more clear every day. And this is why when I hear this capitalism versus socialism false dichotomy, like I like to present something more provocative, which is socialism is winning with everybody under 50 now. And capitalism has now lost the 50% position. It's at 49%. That is new. Over the last 2 years, it was in the like low 60s or something. It has completely collapsed. And people were expecting Trump as a businessman to come in and with the Republican Party make these changes. But when they see the Overton window move right, and then they get this complete like letdown, then they're going to search for another alternative. And I really do believe for many people, not the majority, but for many people, they look at the Republican Party and say, well, that's socialism for corporations and foreign countries and for the rich and powerful. And then the Democrats is socialism for poor people. I really do think that that's the calculation they're making. So what I've been pounding the table on for almost the last year has been the Republican Party needs to present an alternative. They need to be mature enough to say, here's what's wrong with our current system. And maybe we need better capitalism, but this is what it means, and vote for us and we will give you that. And that's not what they're doing at all. It's just, hands over ears, la, 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 la. The Democrats are evil. Socialism's evil. It's all collectivism. You vote for right collectivism or left collectivism. It's all, it's just, they want their bread buttered. The younger people have been left behind and nobody's advocating for them. And eventually they're going to have all of the political power. It's only a matter of time. So the Republicans are just, if they don't get in front of this, they're just going to be completely left behind. And then, people like me and Rich Barris are out there rubbing their nose in this reality, and we get attacked. Oh, you're a socialist. Okay.
When you say get out in front of this, the Republicans better get out in front of this. What do you mean by that?
Well, so for instance, the Republican Party is the party of oligarchy and corporatism and corporate welfare. You know what I mean? Like
Bernie Sanders would love you saying that.
Well, it's true. I mean, where's the Pfizer accountability? That was never going to happen, right? Why are we still using Roundup? Well, that was never going to happen. It's just like, why are we digging in on increased home values when the median first-time homebuyer age is 41 in this country? Well, the National Association of Realtors wants to keep, and the home builders, we put a home builder in charge of our home building department of the federal agencies. Like, of course, they're going to want the values higher. And so on almost every one of these things, it makes life better for the younger people. I would even say feminism, to a certain degree, is supported by a lot of the older people in the Republican Party, and the younger people are turning on that really hard because it's really screwed them over a lot. So just like on almost every single thing, what you're starting to see is younger people who completely distrust authority and they want order. They just want things fixed. And people are going to project capitalism versus socialism, DEI, woke versus fascist. They're going to project these things onto that. But what they really want is to be in charge and have things fixed. And they want like really a strong man. They were begging for Trump to be a strong man. You remember that Napoleon Bonaparte quote he made? He who saves his country violates no laws. It was something like 62%. It's close. Like 62% of people under 40 said, yeah, okay, I agree with that. That's a good quote. That makes sense. And the older people were like, no, that's a bad idea. And like over and over again on arrests, it's the younger people that want arrests. Blowing up narco boats. Yep. Blow up the narco boats. That's great. We should do more of that. Like deport the illegals. Yep. Ignore the judges. Yep. That's what the younger people want. I even did polling where we asked under 40 voters if they would support giving control of our own legislative capability to an advanced artificial intelligence. And it was close to 60% of under 40 conservatives were like, yep, this system, this constitution's failed. Legislators co-opted. Let's just put an AI in charge. Almost half of under 40 conservatives wanted to put an AI in charge of world military. Like that's how crazy it's gotten. So, and then like the Republicans are just like, well, if we just try to be Ronald Reagan harder, then everything will work out. And you couldn't be any farther from the truth there.
Folks, we're talking with Mark Mitchell, owner of his new operation called The Honest Poll. Go to www.thehonestpoll.com. That's Mark's website. I'm sure you can contact him directly through this site. Mark's an interesting guy, blunt, data-oriented, anti-establishment conservative pollster who believes the polling industry has badly misunderstood the modern American electorate and who is willing to criticize Republicans as well as Democrats when the numbers support it, when his data supports it. And he's got more data coming in. And Mark, that brings up a point just before we break. Do you have any polls coming out?
I'm going into the field with my first national poll tomorrow. So we should have results back by the end of the week. The goal is to do them like at least every 3 weeks, and I'll string the stories out on my website. We're going to have some of them available for free. Some of them are behind a paywall. There will always be the full crosstabs available, and we're going to have like a pretty affordable, paywall price like for full polling crosstabs. I'm really excited, but again, I have no editorial restrictions, period, whatsoever. So I really want to go into some wild stuff, some just personal things of interest. I want to hit this socialism versus capitalism thing very hard. And what I mean is just ask it from a bunch of different directions to understand the context of what people really think, because a lot of people think the system has failed. But like what parts of the system and how can you speak to the parts that succeed? And what you'll see is like people want large corporations punished. They want businesses that employ illegals raided. They want the major tech companies to be antitrusted. And that's something that like antitrust under Trump was going to do until lobbyists got them all fired. And that's going to be a huge story that comes out in September. That's right. Like, and they're going to, so this is why I say the midterms is so predictable, because there are real things. And again, was Trump involved in this? Like, probably not. But it was the people
I would say that look at the anti-pharma element that's come out since COVID that has a disposition against a lot of the big pharmaceuticals that allegedly were killing people with unproven vaccines. I mean, we have some serious issues going down that path right now that are rippling back into the news headlines with Anthony Fauci now giving testimony or refusing to give testimony before Congress. We're with Mark Mitchell, thehonestpoll.com. We'll have more on a lot of other topics right after this.
It's finally here, our second annual mega sale. This sale only comes around once a year, so take advantage of the best offers ever while you can. For example, save 50% on our Giza Dream bed sheets, as low as $29.98. And for the first time ever on TV, MyPillow mattresses and MyPillow mattress toppers as low as $99.98. And you save 50% on our Lux Pure 6-piece towel sets. Regular $69.98, now only $39.98. And our best-selling standard MyPillows, regular $49.98, on sale for $17.98. Wait on it, mega sale, only $14.98. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use this promo code to take advantage of our second annual mega sale. But wait, There's more. To make the mega sale even more special, when you order right now, your order's going to ship absolutely free.
Welcome back, GrassRoots TruthCast. Gene Valentino here with Mark Mitchell from the honestpoll.com. Honest Poll is his new polling entity. Mark, what's changed now that you've moved off on your own in terms of your approach or your intended strategy of going forward in future polling? Is it what's going to make you different from the rest of them in your pack?
I'm going to piss everybody off. And that's the only way that you know that I'm independent, because I can.
What does that mean?
Well, like, for instance, I know for a fact that when MAGA was turning on having sugary beverages and SNAP, that the American Beverage Association went to right-leaning pollsters and lobbyists and said, you know what, we need help with that. And so they went out and just lied and made up fake polling for $2 or $3 million, got a major payday, and went around. And the problem is that, like, they had taken it out at the federal level, but the state AGs, Republican state AGs, Republican state legislatures were going after SNAP and removing the sugary beverages. So here you have Republican pollsters, Republican lobbyists going after Republican legislators in Republican states and doing the corporate welfare and lying about what the American people believe. And so literally, if you are in DC and you are part of any political establishment, if you're tied to a Republican Party, you will be put, or the Democrat Party or Democrat dark money or any of these organizations, you will be put in a situation where it's expected that they're purchasing your credibility for a certain defined outcome. You get something the opposite of what American people want. And there's a very big story coming out that I was tangentially involved with, where that happened on the Republican side with a major $2 million engagement where they were trying to convince Trump that MAGA supported a program with amnesty. And that is not the case. That's not, people want them all gone. Now, to be more nuanced, Americans don't like the optics of women getting shot in the face with tear gas canisters. But there are ways, as we all know, like federal E-Verify mandates and rating employers of illegal aliens. All of these things are off the table for the Trump administration. And so everybody is stuck in this horrible situation that makes me sick to my stomach, where they're either completely upset at the lack of more deportations, or they're trying to put a big smile on numbers that are just like not that great. And it's like, what a situation to be put in when ultimately lobbyists and corporations are the ones that determine what happens. So I will not be involved in any of that. Most of my money will come from advertising and will hopefully come from the people who support me when I get my website paywall.
What I find so interesting is that, you know, in your business, it's a clear distinction between getting paid by your client who's looking for a certain outcome, let's face it. And then, so you're trying to appease what your customer wants to hear, when in fact, what he needs to know might be the antithesis of what he wants to hear that he's paying you for. And I think what we're going to find is that in the context of what you just said, there are going to be many people who are going to realize, as this whole social democrat nuance evolves, that this is less about Trump and more about how we've behaved as a nation. I mean, the Democrat Party going off on this tangent can't blame you for the polling you give them that tells them what they don't want to hear. Am I making sense?
This is business as usual in Washington, D.C. That's what this is. Washington, D.C. is occupied territory. It's occupied by corporations, foreign government interests, NGO dark money, and intel agencies. Let's be honest. Also the intel agent. And it's like on the Democrat side, it's the same thing. And the only unfortunate thing for Republicans is that often on the Democrat side, what the voters want actually align with what the Democrat establishment wants. Like, for instance, Democrat voters have been tricked into thinking that there's like pervasive global warming, and the Democrat establishment wants a Green New Deal. So those two things meet up. But like on the Republican side, Republican voters want things like higher wages. And there's no chance in hell that the Americans for Prosperity or the Cato Institute or any of these organizations are going to fund anything that makes it look like the government should have positive wage policies. And wasn't that long ago, 100 years ago, when Teddy Roosevelt like ran on increased wages and trust busting and standing up for the American people. And so there was a huge opportunity, and our situation aligns, especially the immigration situation aligns very closely with what was happening in Teddy Roosevelt's America. And it's like, I don't know the rest of the Washington, D.C. context, but he was a man of principle that stood up for the things that he believed in, and that was for the American voter. And that's just not happening here. And again, yes, there are some problems with Trump, but it's who he's surrounded with. He's constantly exposed to basically what I would say complete, like being co-opted by Fox News and Rupert Murdoch and people.
How would you compare? I understand what you're saying, but how does that compare to a Rex Tillerson, a Mad Dog Maddox, Anthony Scaramucci? I could name 3 or 4 more. They were difficult sidekicks for Trump to have. Now, Trump was advised to bring these people on. Yeah. It turns out that they were bad picks from Trump's point of view. The hell with you, he says to himself. Next, if I get reelected, I'm picking my own team. His new team with Pete Hegseth and Rubio alone, not to mention Scott Bessent, have really shown to be a hell of a good circle of worker bees around him. But my point is, back then, there was so much complicity behind Trump's back. I don't know how the man held it together, but they said, people can't work for Trump. Well, yeah. I as a CEO of a company, I've had to fire some people like that who work at cross purposes with your vision. Now I'm getting hired by the board of directors and the shareholders to deliver a solution, an objective. Yeah, and right. If you've got people surrounding you that are in conflict with that, and I would submit most of America doesn't see that sort of bad behavior. Where do you think this is going in the 2026 midterms?
Well, let me respond to what you said, and then I'll give you my 2026. And I'll probably piss some people off when I say this too, but in many ways, in my opinion, just being an outside observer, I think the first Trump administration was much more successful. Why do I think that? Well, the bar was lower. The opposition was certainly not prepared. And in my opinion, Trump had the right leaders internally in the White House. Was everybody the right leader? Like, no, Chris Christie is your transition head. Pretty retarded. Like stuff like that. Like John Bolton, like why? Like, why'd you do that? And like each of these things has a reason. And you had your characters like Scaramucci. But I think he had folks like Steve Bannon, like keeping the White House focused on the underlying like goals of the administration. And you had Trump on Twitter being a very important, like engaging in his base, learning from the feedback loop that is social media. I think that was a very important thing. And what you would see in the first 100 days specifically was a lot of content that was being put out of like, hey, the bar was low, but look at all these things we accomplished. And that was like, wow, like it really took an outsider. This is exactly what we needed. So much so that by 2020, the economy was turning around and we had China on the ropes. Like they released COVID for a reason. They unleashed Biden, in my opinion, a CCP creature on purpose. The statism of the Biden administration and the weaponization of cost against the American middle class, I think this is all a China operation, to be honest with you.
But now we get this. See more of that, Mark, if people see more of that, I would think the effect would be look, I don't know if I like Donald Trump or not, but I'm not abandoning ship on this guy now because he's clearly opened up Pandora's box. Look what he did with Elon Musk on Doge alone. The opening up of inefficiency of government has created a ripple effect on the continuation of that of that investigation across all departments and divisions of government. My point here is I think the American people, I was expecting a different answer from you today. I thought you were going to say, based on your polling, that it's likely by surprise that more Republicans would be aligning with Trump, not because he's so good, but because the other side is so bad. I'm staying with what I've got.
That does not work anymore.
You're saying that's not true.
In fact, people are it's going to have a negative effect. Everything they're doing now with the right, I think, will have blowback. So you have the beginning of the Trump second administration was very effective the first 2 months. Now, we could quibble about how Trump should have handled the judges and how there should have been a legislative response and how the Republicans have ultimately failed, and legislatively. And I think Trump does bear a lot of blame for that, because he, over the last 10 years, has not been very aggressive about getting America First legislators in. And I'm sorry, there's no fix for that. Unfortunately, that's just one of the things where he made his bed and now he laid in it. You were talking about the nuclear option. I agree. I think the Republicans should use the nuclear option, but they only have 25 votes in the Senate. And that's just reality. So it's just never going to happen. So when he's out there railing against it, it just looks ineffectual. But now it's okay, you remember Doge was talking about auditing the Department of Defense, going into Fort Knox, shutting down the IRS. There were some major things, right? And then Trump very famously broke with Elon.
Couldn't be any more major than trying to remove the Senate from our governance and closing down the Pentagon.
Well, I'm just saying, Doge, I think, was like I described earlier, where Trump was effective in moving the Overton window right and convinced a lot of people that most of our annual expenditures are fraudulent, but then not giving them the payoff. And so the frog is currently in a pot of water on a stove, okay? And the way I think it kind of worked is Americans felt the temperature going up. They're like, I don't know what's going on. And then Trump comes along and says, well, you're on a stove. Look at there's the dial, obviously. And then Biden comes along and turns the dial up, and we're all starting to boil. And so everybody's desperate. Trump, we're boiling here. You got to come back and turn the dial down. And now they're looking at him. They're like, he's talking about the dial. We all see the dial. Why aren't you turning the dial down? And it's Biden turned the dial up is not going to work. It's no, we're about cooked here. You know what I mean? And I have a whole body of polling knowledge that supports this. 72% of America is concerned that we're living in a police state. But also 72% of America is angry at the level of waste, fraud, and abuse. 76% support Doge-style audits of every federal agency. It's just over and over and over again, even though the elections are very close nationally, and obviously there's a lot of election fraud. Overwhelmingly, Americans are pro-reform, anti-big spending, anti-big business. They want deportations. They want law and order. And the Republican Party is not that party right now. They are not. And even if they talk that way, they're not proving it. But then you hear some of them talk, and it's Mike Johnson will get up there and just talk about how great it is that this is the government that removed LGBT, not understanding that the woke stuff was a battle that the culture war was fighting 3 or 4 years ago to enable a Trump win, and that they've already moved past that because they want major reforms. And it's and that's Trump in his election integrity speech even had a line about LGBT stuff. And you're getting to the point where everybody under 40 is like, so what? You know what I mean? Or we had an LGBT person take out Charlie Kirk and he didn't do anything. That's the kind of reaction you're getting. And it's because they perceive Trump, especially the under 40s, went from a 60% Trump approval to 35%.
Yeah.
And the sentiment I hear are words like rug pull. And so they're not going to forget that. And what you're going to see is what you're really seeing is a political landscape that is primed for a political horseshoe, where younger people will say, well, hey, my values aren't that different than the left people. it's really under 50. It's basically everybody who grew up with the internet is looking at the people in governance and saying, well, they have this older value set. Like, I don't care about Israel. I don't care about the word capitalism. I don't care about XYZ. And what you see is like a Chuck Schumer is closer to a Mitch McConnell. And you're going to see maybe an AOC is closer to an outsider economic populist on the right.
Or do you see it as a Gen Z crowd just not trained on with any historical knowledge of what preceded us?
Here's the beauty about public opinion is that you might have a valid point, but it's the older generation that taught these kids. So whose fault is that?
And in this case, what did the older generation teach Gen Z these last 10 years?
So point one is that, okay, well, like, yeah, you're right, potentially. But then if you try to preach to them, it's not going to have the intended effect, which is what you're seeing is that there's currently a lot of foreign interference dollars going in. I don't think this is controversial to say.
This is the most pure ground to have a conversation on, is with a pollster like you, who has a very interesting take on it. Like I said to you earlier, I don't need to be right. I just need to bring the thought out, and I'd like not only to know what the public thinks, but what are the facts that support it either way. Here's a question for you.
Gene, I don't see you pounding a glass of whiskey and you're not pulling your hair out. I'm thrilled by the level of chaos that's coming, because I think that there's a lot of opportunity there.
Well, it's going to keep you busy.
Well, certainly. Well, our views are going to go up. Like, it is going to happen, right?
What's changed? What's the actual 2024 polling record for Mark Mitchell versus the other major pollsters? In the business side of things, we compete by differentiating. What makes you different from 6 other pollsters, not like them? What are you going to pitch going forward for 2026 that will be unique in what we should look for from a Mark Mitchell poll?
So I began to come back to, I think my unique selling proposition is I'm willing to trash everybody. And I think that my takes are objective and based on fact. Although we did do pretty well in the 2024 cycle, Rasmussen's track record has always done like pretty good. We've had some bad years like 2018. That wasn't me. And that was a tough one because so many people were like amped up about Trump being a Russian asset. In the 24 cycle, I think what's most important is how much polling we put out, especially on a state polling level. We put out more polls than anybody except for Morning Consult. And it was just me, not a $1 billion company. We got, I think, 10 out of the 11 states called within the margin of error. 6 out of the 7 battlegrounds called in the right direction. One of them was Michigan. We were like 1.5 points off or something like that. And our average polling bias in the states was under 2 points, like 1.8, I think it was. And on a national level, our final poll was 2.4. We were within 0.5 point until California kept counting. But I think the most important thing is that in no poll, in not one single poll in the entire 24 cycle, did we have Kamala Harris winning. And so that was important because we were the only ones putting out consistent numbers on a weekly basis. And everybody else was trying to show Kamala Harris up like 7 points. So what happens is you have this period of massive lying over the August and September area. And then at the end, they're like, well, yeah, Trump's probably going to win. And so they all bring their numbers closer. And then all the accuracy is based on your final call. Well, it's like, no, if you followed Rasmussen, you knew for the entire cycle that Trump was going to win.
Yeah, if you follow it, I'm having trouble understanding how the election got as close as it did when the polling seemed in that chapter in time to indicate a much larger spread. Any predictions about candidates coming up in 2026 or 2028, and where are you going with your polling? So in 2026, I can just guess right now, but so much stuff could happen. The last generic ballot I did was Democrat +4, which would actually mean Republicans have a chance of picking up seats. I don't believe it, though, because it's been a few weeks.
It was around July 4th. There was this sort of like Iran memorandum of understanding, like bounce. Really good pollsters like Barris and Emerson are putting out Democrat plus 10 right now. So if that's the bookends, we're seeing somewhere between like 2018 or a slight Republican pickup. But there's all of these confounding factors like the amount of money that Act Blue has continued to raise, and we haven't arrested them or stopped the Chinese money from pouring in.
That
Also,
to me is a big issue. I'd like to have you back to focus on that. To me, the illegal NGOs that have been funding candidates in our nation's governance up to now is the biggest compromise in our constitutional republic. But in keeping with your point, you were talking about Susan Collins, Senator Susan Collins up in Maine. She's always been underpolled up there, and yet she springs forward at the finish line 8 points ahead in the final election. What's going on with the pollsters that they're missing the mark up there?
So the trend I've personally seen is that every single special election since the November 2024 is that Republicans have underperformed where Trump was in 2024. A lot of that is because the younger people aren't turning out to vote. In my polling in November 2024, Trump picked up 40, depending on the poll, 40% of his support was from independents and crossover Democrats. And so it's like you start attacking workers, you start attacking Epstein people. Those people are out because they don't have a reason to come and vote for Republicans. And incidentally, in the Jack Ciattarelli poll that we had, where we were closer than everybody else, Ciattarelli won with voters on over 40. And Kamala Harris was successful at bringing out 90%, Cheryl was successful at bringing out 90% of Kamala Harris's votes from 2024. Republicans only got 70% of Trump's vote. So that is the critical thing that is not necessarily showing up in the polling because it requires somebody to adjust their turnout models. And so there is the case to be made that Republicans will underperform. And then there's also the big outlier of how effective the Democrats are going to be with their money or what unforced errors Trump makes between now and November. But even if the Republicans keep a 51-49 Senate lead, they don't have the Senate. Like we all know that. And they don't have the Senate today, to be honest with you. So the big football is the House. And people say, oh, the map favors Republicans. Oh, look at all this gerrymandering. I don't know. I would call it a coin flip now with a lot of like qualitative reasons that the Democrats are going to outperform. In which case, what you're going to see is just 2 years of, they've been saving it up. They're gonna have Todd Blanche on the stand answering for the Epstein Transparency Act. They're going to pull out Trump's antitrust people. They're going to pull out Trump's pardon people. They're going to walk, because remember how much damage they did with just one simple call that they recorded from Zelensky. So this is going to be, I think.
Well, it ties to a deeper point you touched on, and I hope we get a chance to talk about it in the future. And that's the coterminous issue involving the equal district or redistricting that affects these election maps and the balance that's needed to fairly have this an equitable pari passu, each district throughout the nation being equal as much as possible in population, getting away from some of these false narratives about what a district should be compromised, what should compromise an electoral district. And I think there's room for constitutional amendments because there's too many bad actors that are just going to force you and I to be busy each and every year talking about their bad behavior and what they gerrymandered and caused to hurt the efficacy of an election. Folks, we're out of time. We're with Mark Mitchell of the Honest Poll, honestpoll.com. Check it out. Mark, you got 2 minutes. Give a plug out to the world on the Honest Poll. How do they pay for your service? Where do they subscribe? What can they find out about you?
I don't know if I have a 2-minute pitch prepared. So thehonestpoll.com is a splash page right now. It's got a sign up for my free Substack newsletter. I would really appreciate people sign up for that. And I'm not going to spam you every day. This is just like when real content comes out. Like I said, I'm doing my first national poll. So by next week, we should have the site up. It'll have a paywall. Some of the stuff will be paywalled. Some of it won't. Some of it will be my commentary. Others will be questions that you'll find nowhere else. Because remember, like I was the one in Rasmussen, we were asking about the vaccine safety. We were asking about unexplained deaths. We were asking about election integrity. And everybody else in the industry didn't want to touch any of that because they knew that the political action committee checks would not follow. The donors, the sponsorships, the money from the corporations would not follow. How can you maintain your lobbying job if you're pissing off Pfizer? And that's something that I'm ready to do, is piss off Pfizer. So nothing else like it. Honest Poll Co. is the main account at Twitter. And then my personal account is Honest Pollster.
And I think there'll be a lot of people willing to subscribe when, just from your last statement a minute ago, they're looking for average citizens to step up and support good causes, good people. You're a good cause, and some of the leaders we've had generationally, 20, 30, 40 years in office, certainly goes against the premise that I signed into when I ran for Congress, and that's term limits. Being able to, boy, there's a poll question right there. Renew the issue of term limits in the context of polling, of lobbyists, and see and see what you get. That would impact how lobbyists lobby and fund some of the elected folks if they know their candidate's only around one more term, let's say.
Yeah.
Any closing comments, Mark Mitchell?
No, you're right. Almost all that's like basically a 70% position. 70% roughly assume that their elected leaders are getting ill-earned gains from their position. Another 70-ish% support term limits. It's like pretty much across the board. And so that's the opportunity, though, is if you can, as a leader, believably tap into that 70% of people who want America fixed. And then there's the 25 or 30% who are just happy when Democrats win. It's like, who are these people? The sheep. But it'll get fixed. Like I'm optimistic. It's going to be another rough couple of years, I think.
Well, I'm not sure where we're talking to you from, but I think it's time to let you go back and get more of that suntan. Looks like you've been on the beach.
Yep, and I'm going right back.
Thank you, Mark
Jersey
Mitchell,
Shore,
for joining us here today on another episode of Gene Valentino's GrassRoots TruthCast. And thank you, folks, for joining us. Please subscribe. If you want to reach out to Mark Mitchell, you can do so directly, thehonestpoll.com, or come back through us, subscribe at genevalentino.com. We're pushing out great episodes like this weekly. And when you do, you can also provide comments and criticisms and your insight. And when you do, we will, if there's anything you'd like us to make sure Mark needs to know about, we'll make sure he gets it. Thank you again for another episode of GrassRoots TruthCast. See you soon. Relationships matter because people buy people, and that's why I buy Eddie Zarin Insurance of the Zarin Insurance Agency in Pensacola, Florida. A family-owned business with over 50 years in the business, and they treat people the right way. From homeowners insurance to contractors insurance, condo insurance, commercial insurance, all the different coverages that are out there, and of course auto insurance, they've got you covered. They worry about you first. You're more than a policy number. You're a person who they're watching out for, not when the sun is shining, but after the hurricane has left. If you want real service with real savings, contact Eddie Zarin at the Eddie Zarin Insurance Agency. www.zarininsurance.com. Give them a call today. You'll be glad you did when you do.